King Henry VIII was one of the most feared rulers in history. He rose to power at just 17, commanding nations, bending religion, and executing anyone who stood in his way. But behind the crown was a secret he could never escape. His body was rotting, and it would become the most horrifying downfall of any king in English history. When Henry Tudor became king in 1509, he was just 17. Tall, handsome, athletic. The very picture of the perfect Renaissance ruler. He towered over other men, stood more than 6 feet tall in a world where most barely reached 5.5. His hair shined like copper in sunlight, his eyes were sharp and full of energy, and his body looked built by God himself. Ambassadors wrote home calling him the most beautiful prince in Europe. He hunted, jousted, danced, sang, and wrote music. He could speak 3 languages, debate theology, and outride any man in England. His youth was golden, his strength endless, his confidence unshakable. England had never seen a king like him, but hidden inside that perfect body was a ticking clock, a slow disaster waiting to begin. It started with accidents that seemed minor. In 1524, during a joust, a lance struck his helmet so hard it filled with water, nearly drowning him. He survived, but soon suffered headaches, blurred vision, and bursts of anger no one understood. Then in 1536 came the accident that changed everything. During another joust, his horse fell, and the weight of both man and armor crushed his leg. The king was knocked unconscious for 2 hours. When he awoke, his leg throbbed with agony. Doctors treated the wound, confident he would heal. But he never did. What started as a bruise became a wound that refused to close. It grew deeper, darker, and began to rot. The leg became his curse. Infection tunneled through the flesh, forming ulcers that oozed foul-smelling pus every day. Bandages stuck to his skin, removing them tore away new layers of flesh. The stench filled every room he entered. Servants burned herbs just to cover the smell. Pain became his shadow. The wound never healed. It only worsened. Every day was a battle against agony. And as his body fell apart, so did the man. He could no longer run, dance, or hunt. The once fit king ballooned in size, his body swelling as if in rebellion. Without movement, the fat piled on quickly. His doublets had to be remade again and again until no tailor could fit him. The strong jawline that once defined his face disappeared under layers of flesh. The Golden Prince was vanishing. By 1540, he was a prisoner in his own body, bloated, sick, and furious. His leg wound was so infected that physicians had to drain it daily. The pain was unbearable, the smell revolting, yet no one dared to complain. Every morning began with horror. Attendants unwrapped dirty bandages, revealing a pit of red, infected flesh. They washed it with wine and vinegar, packed it with honey or milk, even burned it with chemicals to kill the rot. The king's screams could be heard down the corridors. He clenched the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. Blood and pus soaked through fresh linen within hours. But worse than the pain was the humiliation. The man who called himself God's chosen ruler now depended on servants to touch his wounds, to feed him, even to help him relieve himself. Every act of help reminded him he was no longer a god, just a man trapped in decay. The infection spread. New sores appeared on his legs, his arms, even his torso. Any small scratch could turn deadly. Modern doctors believe Henry suffered from diabetes, poor circulation, or a bone infection. But back then, no one understood what was happening. The king's own body was turning against him, and the pain changed him. He became short-tempered, suspicious, and cruel. Sleep was almost impossible. The pain kept him awake night after night. His mind twisted in the dark. The charming, laughing king of his youth turned into a man no one recognized. Courtiers could tell how bad his pain was by the sound of his voice. On good days, he was sharp and commanding. On bad days, a word out of place could get a man executed. The wound didn't just rot his leg, it rotted his soul. The older Henry became, the larger he grew. His waist exploded from 32 inches to 54. His chest stretched to 60. He weighed over 350 pounds. Even his clothes became an engineering problem. Chairs had to be rebuilt to hold his weight. Bed frames reinforced with iron. Servants used pulleys just to move him. Every step felt like knives in his legs. The king who once rode horses for hours could no longer climb stairs without being lifted. England's most feared ruler couldn't walk without help. And still, he ate. Food had become his only pleasure. He devoured mountains of meat, sugar, and pies. He drank gallons of wine. No doctor dared stop him. Anyone who did risked losing his head. The more he ate, the heavier he became. The heavier he became, the worse his wounds grew. The worse his wounds grew, the angrier he became. It was a vicious circle of pain, pride, and punishment. By his 50s, Henry was drowning in his own body. His legs leaked fluid. His breath came short. Rashes bloomed under folds of skin. He sweated constantly and snored so loudly it shook the walls. The smell of infection never left his room. Every night he prayed for relief, but none came. He had become a man surrounded by gold, yet buried in rot. His temper became legend. The once charming king turned into a storm that could strike without warning. Ministers, servants, even his wives learned to fear his moods. One wrong word could end a life. Pain had rewired him, and power made it worse. He lashed out to feel in control. When his body betrayed him, he took it out on everyone else. Some historians believe his brain was damaged in the jousting accident. Others think constant pain twisted his mind. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. The king who once inspired love now ruled by terror. His court lived in fear of a man who could order an execution between meals. His wives paid the highest price. His marriage to Anne Boleyn ended with her head on the block. His fifth wife, Catherine Howard, barely 20 years old, was accused of adultery and executed. Some say Henry's paranoia invented her betrayal. Others say he simply couldn't stand being reminded of his own weakness. He could no longer satisfy his wives, and the thought drove him mad. His cruelty became his mask. Each death a desperate attempt to prove he was still powerful, still in control. As his mind darkened, the court itself became infected with fear. Conversation stopped when the king entered a room. Musicians played to calm him. Jesters laughed too hard at his jokes. Even his doctors trembled when they unwrapped his wounds. They knew if he thought they were failing him, they could die for it. More than one royal physician was dismissed or imprisoned for betraying the king's trust. Henry's rage had become law. England itself began to suffer. His constant wars with France and Scotland drained the treasury. His obsession with proving his strength led to thousands of deaths. His break with the Catholic Church, once seen as an act of bold independence, now looked like madness to many. His paranoia reached so deep that even his daughter Mary was forced to sign papers calling herself a bastard. No one was safe, not even his blood. By the 1540s, Henry's daily life had turned into a ritual of pain. His private chambers became a kind of royal sick room. Servants hovered like ghosts, carrying clean bandages, vinegar, honey, and herbs. The smell of rot and incense mixed in the air. Mornings were torture. Physicians peeled away soaked wrappings from his leg, revealing red flesh and tunnels of pus. He would grip his chair and shout in agony as they cleaned the wounds. After the bandages were changed, he would sit in silence, trembling and sweating. That was his normal day, and he still had to rule a country. His chamber had become a miniature hospital. Tables lined with tools, bowls of water, jars of ointment surrounded him. The process could take hours. His pain was so constant it shaped his schedule. Meetings delayed, ambassadors waiting weeks just to see him. England's future now depended on a man who couldn't escape his bed. He was also too proud to show weakness. Henry believed kings were chosen by God. How could God's chosen one admit to decay? So he hid it. He buried his pain beneath gold and ceremony. His clothes became more extravagant, his jewelry heavier, his speeches grander. He was rotting inside, but his image had to remain perfect. The contradiction ate away at him. The King of Kings reduced to a broken man pretending to still be divine. Moving him from room to room became a military operation. Workers built ramps where stairs used to be. Wider doorways were cut through palace walls. Heavy wooden chairs with wheels replaced thrones. Servants had to lift him with pulleys just to get him up the stairs. Each move took days of planning. The once active king who loved hunting and dancing now lived trapped in a few rooms, surrounded by the smell of his own wounds. His isolation grew worse than his pain. He stopped seeing most people, even old friends. Few could stand to look at him. The young, handsome Henry who once dazzled Europe was gone. In his place sat a massive, bloated figure with swollen legs and eyes darkened by exhaustion. Visitors wrote that he looked like a mountain of flesh. Servants whispered about the stench that filled the corridors. He had become a living warning about the price of pride. At night, his mind tormented him. The pain never stopped, even when he tried to sleep. He tossed and groaned, waking up in panic. He drank to dull the agony, but it only made him angrier. His nightmares were full of guilt, the faces of his wives, his friends, and the men he'd executed. He could no longer tell if his visions were real or dreams. He began to see betrayal everywhere. Even his loyal advisors were accused of treason. His last wife, Catherine Parr, nearly met the same fate. In one paranoid episode, he signed a warrant for her arrest. But when she found out, she went to him and claimed she only debated religion, with him to ease his pain. The lie worked. Henry, desperate to believe he was still loved, forgave her. She survived. Barely. Everyone else lived in fear of his moods. By now, his leg wounds had become monstrous. They oozed constantly, soaking through bandages. The skin around them turned dark and swollen. The infection likely spread to his bones. When the pain became unbearable, he would scream for his doctors, demanding they fix what could not be fixed. Some nights, he would beg God for forgiveness. Other nights, he cursed him entirely. But time was running out. His body was collapsing faster than anyone dared admit. By 1546, he could no longer stand on his own. His skin turned gray, and his eyes grew dull. Servants could hear his labored breathing through the night. Yet even as death crept closer, no one dared tell him. To say the king was dying was treason. So his doctors lied. They told him he was improving while watching him fade away. By early 1547, Henry's nightmare was almost over. He spent most days sitting in a heavy chair near his bed, too weak to move. His body was swollen and leaking, his skin pale and stretched, his breath shallow. Every cough hurt. The ulcers on his legs had turned black with gangrene. The smell in his chamber was unbearable. The man who once ruled through fear and power was now surrounded by silence, too weak to raise his voice. His court waited for the inevitable. His mind was barely there. Some days he woke up clear and commanding, barking orders as if still the young king. Other days he muttered nonsense, talking to ghosts, seeing his old friends, long dead, calling from the corners of the room. He thought of his wives. He thought of the tournaments and music of his youth. He thought of how far he had fallen. His doctors continued their useless routines, draining blood, applying poultices, pretending he was improving. Everyone knew it was a lie. No treatment could stop the decay. They were just keeping a corpse alive a little longer. No one dared tell him the truth until one man finally stepped forward. Sir Anthony Denny, one of his closest attendants, knelt beside the dying king and told him quietly, the end was near. It was time to prepare his soul. For the first time in years, Henry didn't get angry. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't deny it. He simply asked for Archbishop Cranmer. When Cranmer arrived, the king was already fading in and out of consciousness. He could no longer speak clearly. The archbishop told him to give a sign if he still believed in Christ and sought mercy. Henry squeezed his hand once. A final, silent answer. In the early hours of January 28, 1547, King Henry VIII died. There were no grand last words, no thunder or prophecy. His breathing slowed, then stopped. The man who once bent a nation to his will simply slipped into silence. The room stayed still for a long time, as if the walls themselves didn't believe it. The nightmare that had haunted England for years was finally over. But even in death, Henry's story refused peace. His body, bloated and infected, caused problems no one could solve. His coffin, sealed in lead, was so heavy that dozens of men struggled to carry it. According to legend, as the coffin rested overnight in an abbey, it burst open. Dogs were found licking the blood that leaked from the cracked metal. Whether true or not, the story spread fast. People called it God's punishment, the final curse on a man who defied heaven itself. He was buried in Windsor Castle beside Jane Seymour, the only wife who gave him a son. The grand tomb he designed for himself was never finished. Today, his grave is marked by a simple black stone. Tourists walk over it without knowing that beneath their feet lies one of the most terrifying and powerful men in English history.